Exclusive contracted novel by Feilu Novel Network. Anti-Japanese War. Many sons and many blessings, creating the highest warlord. Born in 1923, he became Zhang Xuelin, the eldest son of the Zhang family in Fengtian. At the beginning, you will receive the Duozi Duofu system, where as long as you marry and take concubines, you can receive rewards for having multiple sons and daughters. Successfully married, obtained a divine-level rifle, and started with a bang. Successfully married and obtained the EP1-10 design. Successfully took a concubine and obtained the 40 fire production line. Birth of offspring and acquisition of the Snow Leopard assault team. Birth of offspring and acquisition of aircraft carrier formation. From then on, Zhang Xuelin was unstoppable and rose from nothing to something, rising from white mountains and black waters. Starting from the August 1st bar, build the strongest Blue Star Army. To nuclear bombs, aircraft carriers, J.20, dominate the Blue Star sea, land, and air, truly daring to be the first in the world, to turn the tide and save China from danger. He even led a 1 million-strong army across the black waters and leveled the Eastern Ocean with a mighty force. Wash away the 100-year national shame of China. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. Chapter 1. Fengtian Arsenal. Marshal is here. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Fengtian Arsenal. Marshal is here. In the spring of 1923, Fengtian Arsenal. The spring in northeast China is very cold, with ice debris everywhere. Han Lin-chun, who was then the general manager of the military factory, stood at the entrance of the factory, constantly rubbing his hands. He waited early in the morning at the entrance of the arms factory, his gaze occasionally turning to the main road outside the factory. General manager, why don't you wait? Your temperament is likely to not sleep until noon and won't wake up. Beside Han Lin-chun, a slightly younger aide draped him with a dark green military coat, as he said. Wait and see. Han Lin-chun looked at the door of the arms factory with complex eyes and said with regret, today we are going to decide whether to put the new rifle into production. In the end, this big deal will definitely require the handsome son to make the decision. We all work long hours for the old marshal. When the young marshal wakes up, we wait until that time. After finishing speaking, Han Lin-chun turned his head to look behind him and said to the other officials in the arms factory, it's really cold. Everyone should go back to the office and wait, go and warm up. Sun Mingli, the financial officer of the arsenal, rubbed his hands and said, General Manager, why don't we go and discuss first? When the marshal arrives, let's give our own suggestions first, and then let the marshal make a decision. The deputy officer followed suit and said, yes, General Manager. You can see a few miles away from here at a glance on the main road. How could there be a trace of the marshal's convoy? Wu Cheng, the staff member in charge of the procurement business of the arms factory, put his hands in his sleeves and said, I guess we won't be able to come in the afternoon. With the temperament of the two young commanders under our old commander's knee, if we had gone to drink some flower wine last night, it might have been enough to make it today. Han Lin-chun turned around and glared at Wu Cheng. Oh. Emotional Wu doesn't often encounter two young marshals drinking flower wine. Wu Cheng's face changed and he sneered, occasionally, not often. Han Lin-chun withdrew his gaze and remained silent. Wu Cheng is nominally his subordinate, but how could he manage procurement in an arms factory without any background? Over the years, Wu Cheng has been doing a lot of personal things, even having connections with Westerners behind the scenes. Han Lin-chun knows about these things, but he has no choice but to take Wu Cheng. Because Wu Cheng's cousin is the handsome second and two. Han Lin-chun was particularly frustrated that the moth in front of him couldn't move, but now he has hope. Because the new person in charge of the arsenal is more powerful than his background in Wu Cheng. If one has a strong relationship, who can have a strong relationship with a young commander? Ren Tmo is the handsome biological son. Would you be afraid of him being a little Wucheng? However, even though Han Linchun thought so in his heart, there was not even a ghost on the mainland in front of him. Hey! With a sigh, Han Linchun waved his hand and greeted the crowd, let's go back and make a total first. Not long after, the conference room of the arms factory was filled with people. Han Linchun was holding a new style rifle that was over 1 meter long in his hand, and with a hint of pride on his face, he introduced it to everyone. Everyone, keep an eye on the new automatic rifle. This is our latest designed and manufactured sample rifle, purchased from Austria and made according to German standards. It's much stronger than the fire sticks used by the Southerners now. Everyone, please share your opinions. It will affect the production tasks of our arsenal for the next half of the year, and we will take them seriously. This last sentence was almost spoken by Han Linchun, who was staring at several moths led by Wu Cheng in the arsenal. Someone immediately cleared their throat and said, General Manager, I can trust the rifle you started making. How about we just consult with the young commander and start production? Someone next to me spoke up and said, yes, the young Marshal is not very old, so he is definitely not as good as General Han in weapon design. I estimate that in the end, the General Manager will have to make a decision. Almost, isn't it just a matter of training and experience that the old commander asked the young commander to come to the arsenal? Do you really expect him, a young man, to be able to make guns? Not entirely, after all, everyone can see that the old Marshal likes another young Marshal, so sending this Xuelin young Marshal to our arsenal to make a living may not be good. In the future, we may have to spend a long time with this young Marshal. Han Linchun looked at his subordinates as they discussed each other. How could he not understand what these people were saying? In fact, Han Linchun also believed in his heart that Major Marshal Zhang Xuelin, who was sent to the arsenal by the old commander, could only serve as a bearish commander at most. In fact, the entire arsenal still relies on its own Han Linchun. The only function of that Marshal Zhang is to suppress the disobedient people in Wucheng for himself. Thinking of this, Han Linchun turned his head to look at Wu Cheng and asked, Officer Wu, what is your opinion? Wu Cheng's 2 dark eyeballs purred as he smiled and said, of course I agree with your suggestion. The production of new rifles is urgent. A hint of darkness flashed in Han Linchun's eyes. Wu Cheng's support for the production of new rifles is not to support Han Linchun, but to produce new rifles. A large amount of raw materials need to be purchased. As a procurement officer, Wu Cheng can naturally make a fortune from it. Suddenly, Han Linchun became even more eager for the arrival of Marshal Zhang. It seemed as if heaven had sensed Han Linchun's piety, and suddenly, the sentry standing outside the door shouted loudly, General, here we are. Bang! The conference room door opened and a handsome young man in a straight military uniform strode in. Everyone in the conference room had just reacted, their faces tightened, and their conditioned reflexes were generally in unison as they stood up to salute. Hello, young Marshal. The young officer stood at the top of the conference room, glanced at the crowd present, and said, let's all sit down. Upon hearing him say so, only the managers of the arsenal in the conference room dared to sit down again. The Major Marshal, who arrived at this moment was none other than Zhang Xuelin, who was sent by the Northeast King Zhang Xuelin to manage the Fengtian arsenal. At this moment, Zhang Xuelin rubbed his face, which was slightly numb from the cold, with countless emotions. Even though he has been traveling for a few days, he still hasn't fully accepted his identity as the eldest son of the Northeast King for a while. That's right, the soul inside Zhang Xuelin at this time comes from the blue star of the 21st century in the future. I was struck by lightning in a thunderstorm and traveled to this world, taking away the body of the former Marshal Zhang Xuelin. Becoming the eldest son of Zhang Xuelin, the king of the northeast of the Dragon Kingdom today. Unfortunately, his eldest son is not well liked by Zhang Xuelin, and the northeast king prefers his youngest son Zhang Xuelyang. If not, Zhang Xuelin would not have come to take charge of the arsenal. At this moment, Zhang Xuelin, who was sitting in the main seat of the conference room, remained silent, and the others were even more imposing and dared not speak out. At this time, the relationship between superiors and subordinates is not just for fun, whether they are high or not will lead to losing their heads. But Zhang Xuelin didn't mean to speak for a moment. He looked at the respectful faces in front of him, and suddenly, he felt the pressure and responsibility on his shoulders were exceptionally difficult. Zhang Xuelin, who is familiar with history, naturally knows what will happen on the land under his feet in the future. The Japanese invaders entered the border, causing great changes in northeast China. From then on, the White Mountains and Black Waters of the Dragon Kingdom suffered from decades-long wars and cholera. In order to completely occupy the northeastern land of the Dragon Kingdom, the Dongyang people immigrated from their own country and massacred the dragon people on this land, leaving behind the elderly, weak, sick, and disabled to work as oxen and horses for the Dongyang people. Countless dragon people died at the gunpoint of the eastern people, and the land of the Dragon Kingdom was brutally ravaged and trampled upon by the eastern devils. Bang! Zhang Xuelin, who was increasingly angry in his heart, slapped the conference table in front of him hard. He even couldn't help but curse and say, "Grassy little Japanese devils. I'll kill you all." Zhang Xuelin's casual scolding made everyone present dumbfounded. Han Linchun, Sun Mingli, and Wu Cheng looked at each other as he lowered his head. What's the situation? How did the Westerners provoke this young commander in front of them? The old Marshal has not been in charge of the 3 eastern provinces for many years now, and his relationship with the Westerners is ambiguous. Why is this young Marshal so temperamental? At this moment, no one dared to jump out and touch the young master's mold, and for a moment, everyone in the conference room remained silent. Zhang Xuelin, sitting in the top seat, closed his eyes and quietly clenched his fist. Since fate has brought me back to this special period and given me the identity of the commander of the Northeast Army, I must never let this land repeat the same mistakes as before. We must never let the people on this land suffer as much as in their past lives. We must never let the little Japanese invaders trample on our homeland recklessly again. The humiliating history of the past, I want to change him. Change. All changes start from this arsenal in front of us. When Zhang Xuelin opened his eyes again, everyone felt as if a blazing fire had ignited in his bright and lively eyes. Chapter 2. Overcoming Public Opinion. 1-month deadline. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Overcoming Public Opinion. 1-month deadline. Zhang Xuelin's gaze fell on the new rifle in Han Linchun's hand, and he immediately recognized what it was. The Liao 13 rifle, also known as the Han Linchun rifle. This type of rifle has been in mass production since 1924, and it should indeed be designed this year. But Zhang Xuelin is not optimistic about this gun. This gun is really not eye-catching. How inconspicuous is it? In Zhang Xuelin's past life, the Japanese invaders successfully invaded the 3 eastern provinces and seized 70,000 of these Liao 13 rifles, but the Japanese did not use any of them and gave them all to the puppet army. Just so inconspicuous. Looking at the rifle in front of him, Zhang Xuelin asked in a low voice, "Is this the new rifle that the factory is preparing to produce next?" Han Linchun quickly handed the newly designed rifle to Zhang Xuelin and said, "Marshal, this is a blueprint we spent a lot of money on from Europe. It is said to have been designed by Austrians. We have made some modifications inside and designed this rifle. Please review it." Zhang Xuelin's eyes twitched slightly, revealing a hint of loss that others should not have noticed. It is said that if one falls behind, they will be beaten. Zhang Xuelin knew that at this time, the technology level of various industries in Longguo was not very strong. But from the rifle handed over by Han Linchun, it can be seen that during this period, the military industry of Long Kingdom was even more unnoticed. You should know that the Fengtian arsenal has already represented the peak of the Longguo military industry during this period. If it weren't for his respect for the elder in front of him, Zhang Xuelin would really not want to look at the rifle in Han Linchuan's hand. Of course, there is also a reason why Zhang Xuelin is a traveler. Before coming to this world, Zhang Xuelin himself was already the military product designer of the Dragon Kingdom in later generations. Having seen various advanced weapons and equipment in his past life, how could he now be interested in a rifle that is 100 years behind his scientific knowledge? Reaching out to take the new rifle from Han Linchuan's hand, Zhang Xuelin's first impression was that it was heavy. It's so heavy, it must weigh almost 10 pounds. This is still the weight without the bayonet. Holding it with one hand is extremely laborious. Feeling the weight of the rifle in his hand, Zhang Xuelin looked at Han Linchun with a questioning expression in his eyes. Han Linchun quickly explained, "Marshal, this rifle is indeed a bit heavier, but it goes far enough and accurate enough." Zhang Xuelin asked, "What General Manager Han means is that this gun has a relatively strong range and accuracy." Upon hearing that Zhang Xuelin could actually use the more professional terms, range and accuracy, Han Linchuan's eyes lit up. He graduated from the Dongyang Non-Commissioned Officer School and received advanced military education. He thought that Zhang Xuelin, who had not attended a military academy, would be completely ignorant of gun construction, but now it seems that it is not the case. Young Marshal is right. This gun, in terms of range and accuracy, can surpass the Han Yang used by the Southerners to make a big cut. Zhang Xuelin believes Han Linchuan's words. Because the quality of Hanyang products themselves is not very good. Playing with the rifle in his hand a few times, Zhang Xuelin immediately discovered the most fatal flaw of this rifle. The mechanism of this rifle does not have a locating pin that prevents the tail from rotating. This way, when the safety is turned off and the gun is pulled, the tail can still rotate freely, which can cause the gun to be unable to be pushed back into the receiver and easily lead to gun malfunctions. In other words, the failure rate of this gun will be very high. For a basic rifle that requires mass production and cladding, this drawback will be fatal. Zhang Xuelin told Han Linchun in a few words about the shortcomings of the positioning pin in this gun. The latter was momentarily stunned and then greatly shocked. Because he knows that the shortcomings mentioned by Zhang Xuelin do indeed exist. "I wanted to go and solve the problem myself, but even if I brought in excellent firearms technicians from Dongyang, I couldn't solve the problem, so I let it go." Now, surprisingly, it was pointed out by Zhang Xuelin, and Han Linchun felt invincible for a moment. He never expected that the young man in front of him, whom he regarded as having no knowledge of gun construction, would see the shortcomings of his carefully designed new rifle for several months in a very short time. Han Linchun said cautiously, "So, Marshal, will we not go back to the furnace and redesign again?" Although he said so, he had already made up his mind to pay attention. If Zhang Xuelin really wants him to come back and redesign, then he will have to surpass Zhang Xuelin and solve the problem directly through the old handsome man. It's not that Han Linchun is lazy and unwilling to come back, but rather that there's not enough time. The outbreak of the Southern War is imminent, leaving very limited time for the Fengtian army. Fortunately, Zhang Xuelin responded to Han Linchuan's movements by slightly shaking his head, which made Han Linchun breathe a sigh of relief. "So, Marshal, will we produce a batch for the army to use first? Then we can gradually improve." Han Linchun thought that mass production of his designed rifle was already a certainty. However, Zhang Xuelin's words made him doubt whether he had heard the wrong thing. "General Manager Han, let's stop producing this rifle for now. We may need to redesign a new rifle." Han Linchun exclaimed in surprise, What? Redesign? I don't know if it's Han Linchun, but at this moment, the other people in the conference room who have been afraid to speak can't sit still. The most unbearable one among them was Wu Cheng, who was in charge of procurement. He immediately said, "Stop producing. How can we do that?" Young Marshal, the old Marshal didn't want everyone to come and eat their meals when he opened such a large military factory. We need to put in enough effort to start working in order to repay the old Marshal. Wu Cheng's words sound good, but in fact, he doesn't want to miss the opportunity to take advantage of the military factory's large-scale procurement of raw materials. After Wu Cheng finished speaking, the other managers in the arms factory also said one after another, yes, producing firearms is a big deal. How can we say that if we don't produce, we won't produce? Marshal, this matter may need to be considered in the long run. Just now, I heard what the Marshal and the General Manager meant. This gun has flaws, but there is no gun in the world without flaws. Even those guns used by foreigners may not be perfect, right? What I'm saying is, this matter, I see. Dang 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 dang. Silent Zhang Xuelin suddenly knocked on the table, and everyone seemed to remember the identity of the young man in front of them. Everyone closed their mouths. The conference room fell back into silence. But when others don't speak, Han Lin-chun, the general manager of this arms factory, can't help but speak. He said to Zhang Xuelin with small wings, "Marshal, the shutdown of the arsenal is a big deal, Marshal. Also, redesigning firearms is a delicate task that will take time." Zhang Xuelin said nonchalantly, "It's okay. When the old man asks, you just say it's my order. As for the new gun design, leave it to me, you don't have to worry." Upon hearing this, Han Lin-chuan's eyes immediately became angry. In his opinion, Zhang Xuelin was just playing around. Firearm design, that can be designed in just 3 or 2 days. Han Lin-chun suppressed his anger with a troubled expression and said, "Young Marshal, once old Marshal gets angry, he can only hit you a few times at most. But if it were us, we might have died. Besides, do you also need time to design a new rifle? Can the old man explain it to you?" Zhang Xuelin frowned slightly, feeling that what Han Lin-chun said was also reasonable. Watching Zhang Xuelin frown, Han Lin-chun knew there was still room for maneuver in this matter. After some thought, he proposed a compromise solution. "Marshal, why don't we do this? 15 days. The construction of the arsenal has been delayed for 15 days. If you can provide us with a new rifle design after 15 days, we will produce the rifle you designed. How about that?" Han Lin-chuan's proposal is completely taking care of Zhang Xuelin's face. Design a new style rifle in 15 days. There may be such geniuses in this world, but Han Lin-chun doesn't believe he is his own young commander. Zhang Xuelin leaned against the chair behind him and slowly said, 15 days. General Manager Han, I'm a bit nervous for 15 days. I still have a big deal to do during this period." Han Lin-chun immediately patted his head and said, "Oh, look at my brain. Young Marshal, don't be angry. I've forgotten that you're getting married this month because I'm getting old and have a bad memory. So, for 30 days, at most, it would be a maximum of 30 days, and the military factory would be delayed for 30 days. What do you mean?" Zhang Xuelin muttered to himself, 30 days, it should be. In time. Okay, just 30 days. Chapter 3. Marshal's Big Marriage, Blooming Branches and Scattering Leaves. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Marshal's Big Marriage, Blooming Branches and Scattering Leaves. After leaving the arsenal, Zhang Xuelin got on the car under the protection of his accompanying deputy and guards. The convoy set off towards the city of Fengtian. Zhang Xuelin was lost in thought as he watched the scene of the car window receding. Without a doubt, the new rifle designed by Han Lin-chun is definitely outdated. Perhaps compared to other warlords in the Dragon Kingdom, the Han Lin-chun rifle may still have a slight lead. But are the top enemies of the Fengtian army currently other warlords in the Dragon Kingdom? Of course not, it's a special Japanese Little Devil. Compared to Little Devil's Type 38 rifle, Han Lin-chun rifle may not be far behind, but it is definitely not leading. Weapon design drawings are often confidential information of various countries. Why can the Fengtian army easily obtain them? It is true that the Fengjun spent a lot of money and effort to buy, but there is also a more crucial factor. That's because this type of rifle has already been phased out by other countries. Belonging to the outdated guy from N years ago. Why did the Japanese invaders later enter the 3 eastern provinces and seize 70,000 Han Linchun rifles, all of which were distributed to the puppet army, while their own main combat forces did not use them? Because they don't like it. Zhang Xuelin took a deep breath. If it weren't for his arrival, it would be understandable for the Fengtian army to continue using the Han Linchun rifle according to the historical process. The world is unpredictable. Since I, who have mastered military research and technology in 100 years, have come to this era, I must never let the blood of the dragon warriors go to waste again. It's already 1923, still using bolt rifles. Isn't it appealing to directly use a fully automatic or semi-automatic rifle? Thinking of this, Zhang Xuelin began to concentrate on recalling all the knowledge about gun making in his mind. Even if you can't get a fully automatic rifle out, there's still no problem getting a rifle that's better than Han Linchun's rifle out. Just as Zhang Xuelin was focused and contemplating, the convoy stopped. The deputy officer sitting in the passenger seat, Yu Qingui, turned to Zhang Xuelin and said, "Young Marshal, you're home. Hurry up and go. The old Marshal ordered me this morning to have lunch with my wife's family and come back early." Zhang Xuelin nodded and said, "Well, I'll leave my brothers to find a place to eat. The account will be recorded under my name, not in the handsome mansion. It's not easy for them to open a shop." The deputy nodded and said, "Lieutenant, rest assured, brothers have a clear understanding." "Well, let's go." Zhang Xuelin got off the car and tidied up his military uniform, then strode over the gate of the handsome mansion in front of the salutes of the guards. "Oh, Lindsay, you're back. The Yang family has already arrived. Hurry up, hurry up." As soon as Zhang Xuelin entered the gate of the handsome mansion, he was pulled by the butler all the way to the living room of the mansion. Before entering the door, a young man with a similar appearance to Zhang Xuelin took the initiative to greet him. "Brother, have you come back? Go and take a look, sister.in.law is really beautiful." Zhang Xuelin smiled and said, "What's wrong? Are you a little sixth son interested? Why don't you let me give it to you? The young man in front of me is the famous Zhang Xueliang in the future." At this moment, the still stunned little Duozi blushed and pulled at Zhang Xuelin, saying, "You go quickly." At this moment, there were already many people sitting in the living room, with Zhang Xuelin, the spokesperson for the entire eastern 3 provinces of the Dragon Kingdom, sitting above him. The old man was holding a large smoking gun in his hand, and a middle-aged man about his age was chatting and laughing loudly beside him, occasionally teasing the young girl sitting next to him in her prime. The girl has almond eyes and peach cheeks, a full bust and slender waist. Even if sitting there still, it still reveals a myriad of charm. Just as Zhang Xuelin entered, the old man gave a hearty smile and said, "Okay. My old Zhang family needs such a daughter.in.law." But when he looked up and saw Zhang Xuelin coming, the Northeast King's eyes showed a hint of hidden displeasure, and he said in a low voice, "You're back. What's going on at the arsenal?" Zhang Xuelin truthfully said, "The rifle designed by General Han's office still needs improvement, so it cannot be started in the next month, so it has been postponed for a while." Zhang Xuelin put down his large smoking gun and spoke a little harshly, "How did I hear that your kid wants to get a new style rifle out within a month? I scolded you so badly. I've been raising you for so many years, what can you do?" "I don't know what I can do. What can't be done by a foreign firearms technician for years? You want to do it in a month." Zhang Xuelin's face remained unchanged. Of course, he knew that it was impossible for him to conceal the situation in the arms factory from this cheap Northeast prince. Directly telling Zhang Xuelin that he wants to design a new rifle every month will make the old man feel arrogant. So Zhang Xuelin said politely, "Father, I didn't mean that. I wanted to take advantage of this month to slightly improve the design of General Office Han." Upon hearing Zhang Xuelin's words, the old man's gaze became slightly less sharp. He looked at Zhang Xuelin and said, I'm a seed of Zhang Yuting. It's okay if I don't have the ability. With me here, you won't starve to death, but you must not be like those southerners who don't know the height of the earth. Do you know? Zhang Xuelin nodded and said, Father taught me a lesson. Seeing Zhang Xuelin being so obedient, Zhang Xuelin nodded with satisfaction and pointed to the middle-aged man beside him, saying, This is your future father. Come and call someone. Zhang Xuelin knew that the middle-aged man in front of him was his father. In law. He definitely doesn't mind picking up a wife for nothing just a few days after crossing over. He turned around and bowed to the middle-aged man, saying, Father-in-law. The middle-aged man responded happily, Hey. Xuelin, I'll give you Jinhua from now on. She turned her head to look at the charming girl beside her and said, Go and stand next to your man, let's take a look. The girl stood beside Zhang Xuelin with a red face and reached out to grab his arm. The elders applauded and praised the talented and beautiful women. Zhang Xuelin patted the table and said, What a jerk. If I had to tell you, don't wait until next week's original wedding date. You two should get married today. Lao Yang. Can you trust me, Zhang Yuting? If you can, leave your daughter today. Zhang Xuelin originally came from a background of bandits and had a bold and unrestrained style. His appearance made his neighbor's family a bit embarrassed. Fortunately, Zhang Xuelin took the initiative to step forward and said, Father, since the day has already been set, there's no need to rush for this moment. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a joke for others? Zhang Xuelin glared at me and said, What a joke. Who dares to see me make fun of Zhang Yuting? For a moment, everyone remained silent. Zhang Xuelin seemed to feel a bit out of place and waved his hand, saying, It's just a matter of it. Let's see for yourselves what happens to you in the future. Just stick to the original schedule. I cursed so hard, let's have dinner. Let's go, in-laws, go eat. The guests enjoyed a meal at noon. During meals, Zhang Xuelin took the opportunity to observe his inexperienced wife several times, only to find that the charming young Jinhua also secretly observed him several times. A week passed by in a blink of an eye. The day of great joy for Zhang Xuelin has arrived. After a series of tedious formalities during the day, Zhang Xuelin was laughed at by everyone and pushed into the bridal chamber. At the moment when Yang Jinhua took off the red cloth on his head and looked at his face, which was full of autumn and charm, Zhang Xuelin's heart was filled with excitement. Yang Jinhua lowered her head and said shyly, Please forgive me, husband. Zhang Xuelin threw Yang Jinhua down and said, I will definitely pity you. Just as Zhang Xuelin was working hard to break through the door and Yang Jinhua let out a deep and painful cry, suddenly a strange voice rang out in Zhang Xuelin's mind. Ding! It has been detected that the host has successfully taken a wife, and the system for getting married, having children, and having multiple children is now activated. Chapter 4. Divine Rifle, Amazing Design. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Divine Rifle, Amazing Design, What is it? Zhang Xuelin, who had just successfully broken through the door, suddenly opened his mouth and said something, ignoring the pain of his beloved wife under him. As a result, Yang Jinhua said in pain, You, that thing. Zhang Xuelin was speechless for a moment. Feeling the warmth that came over, Zhang Xuelin listened carefully. However, apart from his wife's painful cries and groans, he never heard anything again. Just when Zhang Xuelin thought he had just hallucinated and was about to take good care of his wife, activation completed. Introduction to the functions of the system for getting married, having children, and having multiple children and blessings. As long as the host marries, they can acquire various abilities, and as long as the host has children, they can acquire various technologies and subordinates. Congratulations to the host for successfully marrying a wife and obtaining divine level rifle skills. Next, Zhang Xuelin felt a wave of heat rushing towards his forehead, followed by an incredibly comfortable sensation. This made Zhang Xuelin let out a low cry, while Yang Jinhua, who was interacting with him, was confused. I am in such pain, but why does my husband look so good and comfortable? Well, as long as he feels comfortable. In this direction, Yang Jinhua hugged Zhang Xuelin, who was lying on top of him. At this moment, Zhang Xuelin was facing the dual pleasure of soul and body, almost ascending to heaven. He not only can clearly feel the changes in his wife, but also can clearly feel a huge flow of information in his brain. It's all about the production, modification, and upgrading of various firearms. Zhang Xuelin finally understood what the suddenly appearing voice was. It was his own golden finger. Sure enough, the crosser and golden finger are standard. But my golden fingers are a bit strange. Marrying a wife gives me the ability, giving birth to children gives me things. Damn it. What? Damn it. Knowing that he had golden fingers, Zhang Xuelin became even happier, feeling an inexhaustible amount of strength all over his body. So, Yang Jinhua, who had just become a woman, was defeated. Pain kept howling all night. The next day, the sun rises 3 poles. Zhang Xuelin finally got up, and Yang Jinhua struggled to get up on the bed, but was carefully pushed back by Zhang Xuelin. Take a good rest, let the servants take care of anything, he said. Yang Jinhua blushed and said, I'm going to pay my respects to the elders today. Zhang Xuelin said nonchalantly, if you're feeling unwell, rest well. It's okay to go see your elders tomorrow. The old man and a few mothers are all from the past, and they can understand. After speaking, Zhang Xuelin lowered his head and kissed Yang Jinhua on the cheek. He stood up and said, I'll have the kitchen deliver the food to the outside room. If you want to eat, eat it. If you don't want to eat, get up and let the kitchen staff heat it up. Yang Jinhua obediently nodded as she hid herself under the blanket. Afterwards, Zhang Xuelin hurriedly left the bedroom and he just pushed the door open. Ouch. Accompanied by a cry of surprise, Zhang Xuelin found that his door was filled with people. There is the old man Zhang Xuelin, as well as his own mother and a few stepmothers. Zhang Xuelin suddenly understood that several elders in the emotional family were eavesdropping on their own doorstep. For a moment, everyone looked at each other, speechless and extremely embarrassed. Finally, Zhang Xuelin, the old man with a face as thick as the city wall, said with a stern expression, I cursed so hard. The sun is already noon, and you little bunny finally knows you're up. I'll take a stroll with your mom and come over to take a look when we get to you. Zhang Xuelin nodded and said, come and take a look. So, have you finished reading? Zhang Xuelin said with a stern face, you scolded me so badly, what do you care about me? Is there anything you need? Speak up. Zhang Xuelin thought for a moment and immediately said, prepare a larger empty house for me and prepare some paper and pens. Upon hearing this, Zhang Xuelin angrily said, you cursed so hard that you didn't hurt your wife. Are you ready to dance and write? I'll take care of you. The most important thing for you now is to let me have a grandson. Zhang Xuelin smiled and said, it's important to work hard at night to have a grandson, and it's also important to work hard during the day, isn't it? Zhang Xuelin stared at Zhang Xuelin for a while, then turned around and waved his hand, saying, find the butler in the mansion to handle it yourself. I cursed him for not doing my job day by day. So, from this day on, Zhang Xuelin began a very regular life every day. During the day, he hid alone in a spacious room of the handsome mansion, without any movement or knowing what he was doing. At night, he returned to his room, and there was quite a commotion between him and Yang Jinhua. One night, the handsome Zhang Xuelin secretly led his several aunties to the door crack of Zhang Xuelin's small courtyard. Several elderly people heard the conversation inside through the crack in the door. Jinhua, what do you think of my gun? My husband's gun. It's so unique, but Jinhua thinks it can definitely kill all sides on the battlefield. Puff. A few elderly people outside the door couldn't stand this conversation on the spot and quickly retreated. Gradually, the entire household became aware of the heroic deeds of Marshal Zhang Xuelin with his long spear. Handsome Zhang Xuelin not only didn't feel anything inappropriate about this, but also felt a double glow on his face. It's just that Zhang Xuelin locks himself up alone every day, making him a little suspicious. Early that morning, Zhang Xuelin watched as Zhang Xuelin locked himself alone in his room, which he called his studio. He secretly called the guards from the mansion and came to the door of Zhang Xuelin's studio. He cursed and knocked the door open for me. With a command from Zhang Xuelin, the guards stepped forward, bang. The door of Zhang Xuelin's studio was knocked open. Zhang Xuelin, dressed in a military coat, entered the door with a pipe in his mouth and cursed, saying, "You cursed so hard. What are you little bunny doing here every day?" In the studio, Zhang Xuelin was originally lying on a spacious table, holding a ruler in one hand and a pen in the other, carefully writing on a pile of paper. As soon as Zhang Xuelin broke in with someone, Zhang Xuelin's face suddenly changed. Without saying a word, he took out his handgun and pulled it up with a click. Zhang Xuelin's action made his cheap biological father Zhang Xuelin's face change instantly. "I cursed a little brat. Do you want to rebel?" However, Zhang Xuelin's muzzle passed over Zhang Xuelin and pointed towards the guards behind him. The usually gentle northeast Wang Xiaoshui seemed to have turned into a beast that could easily devour people in this second. "Dude, get out of here. Whoever dares to look at it recklessly, I'll beat him now." His action left Zhang Xuelin stunned. The old man stepped forward and picked up the blueprint on the table to look at it. However, it didn't matter, and Zhang Xuelin trembled in place. He snatched the gun from Zhang Xuelin's hand, turned around, and decisively shot the guards on the floor. Bang! The sudden sound of gunfire startled the guard, and Zhang Xuelin cursed harshly, "I cursed so hard. Did the young commander ask you to get out and not hear me?" Chapter 5. 81- Automatic Rifle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. 81- Automatic Rifle. After all the guards left, Zhang Xuelin held the blueprint in his hand and asked Zhang Xuelin, "What a kid. Damn it, where did you get this blueprint from?" Although Zhang Xuelin comes from a horse bandit background and has little culture, being able to sit in the position of the king of northeast China must have a keen eye. Zhang Xuelin couldn't understand the densely packed parameters on the blueprint, but he was clear about what was painted on it. A new type of firearm accessory. However, in Zhang Xuelin's opinion, this accessory is somewhat strange. Zhang Xuelin went over and closed the door that had been kicked open by the guards, then returned and said to Zhang Xuelin, "Dad, this is the new rifle I designed." Pop. Without saying a word, Zhang Xuelin slapped Zhang Xuelin on the head and said, "Speak up. I scolded you, but I don't know your level." "I don't know. Do you expect me to praise your gun like your mother? In law for being able to kill everyone in all directions? Dream it." Zhang Xuelin was stunned. How did the old man know when Yang Jinhua praised him? Looking at Zhang Xuelin's gaze, Zhang Xuelin immediately straightened his face and cleared his throat. He pointed to the blueprint in his hand and said, "Explain it to me well. What is this?" Zhang Xuelin took the blueprint from the old man's hand and began to explain it in detail to him. In the afternoon of that day, the general command of the Fengtian army received an order that a soldier from the reinforcement camp was personally assigned by Zhang Xuelin to Major Marshal Zhang Xuelin as his guard company. Enter the vicinity of the handsome mansion. A few days later, one night, large and small boxes of goods were secretly transported into the handsome mansion. Inside are all kinds of raw materials for firearms, accessories and pieces of mechanical polishing equipment. This batch of raw materials was obtained privately by Zhang Xuelin through personal connections, without going through the channels of the arms factory. In the following days, it seemed that to celebrate Zhang Xuelin's marriage, the handsome mansion would frequently set off firecrackers to celebrate. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed since the agreement between Zhang Xuelin and Han Linchun. On this day, it was the day when the two of them agreed to hold another meeting to decide what firearms the Fengtian military industry factory would produce next. Just like last time, Han Linchun waited early in the morning at the entrance of the arsenal. But the ending was the same as last time, he almost waited until noon and didn't see anyone. However, this time Han Linchun was mentally prepared. He had anticipated that Marshal Zhang Xuelin would not come today. What are you doing here? Is it embarrassing? Do you really expect him to design a new style rifle within a month? Don't be joking. After all, as young people, we still need to experience more. Thinking in his heart, Han Linchun couldn't help but show a hint of pride on his face. This Fengtian army factory still has to rely on itself. As time passed by, Han Linchun summoned everyone from the arms factory to the conference room for a meeting at lunchtime. Everyone understood the meaning as soon as they saw that only Han Linchun was present today and the young commander was not. Someone immediately flattered and said, "General Han, it seems that the design of Marshal's new rifle is not going very smoothly." Ha ha ha. Everyone laughed in unison, and someone quickly continued, yes, Marshal is still too young. After all, General Han has studied in a military academy in Dongyang, and even a major cannot compete. Hey, stop talking, waste a month in vain. I just don't know if there will be any objections from the old handsome side. What opinion can the old handsome have? That's his own son. I've heard about it. The old handsome likes Duozi more than the young handsome like us. Shoo. How dare you say that too? Han Linchun waved his hand to signal everyone to stop and said, "Everyone, the Marshal hasn't come yet today, so it's highly likely that he won't come. After all, young Marshal is young and energetic. He has never experienced the process of developing firearms before, and some mistakes are inevitable, but Marshal's mistake, we can't watch him jump into the pit. The Fengtian arsenal has been delayed for a month and has not started. We can't wait any longer." Director Wu Cheng, who had long been looking forward to this day, immediately responded, "General Manager, please give me your orders." Han Linchun suppressed his dissatisfaction with Wu Cheng and said, "Construction started today. The first batch of raw materials in the factory can only be used for half a month. You need to start purchasing the next batch of raw materials." Wu Cheng grinned and said, "Don't worry, General Manager. I will definitely handle the matter for you. This arsenal really needs you, General Manager Han, to come and handle it." Han Linchun smiled and said, "Who doesn't like good words?" However, Han Linchun's smile just appeared for a second, and then, "General, here we are." Suddenly, the powerful report of the guard sounded outside the conference room. "What? Is the Marshal here?" The conference rooms opened, and Zhang Xuelin stood at the entrance of the conference room, carrying a strange model of a gun that looked both like a submachine gun and a rifle on his shoulder. Schwa, pop. Everyone in the conference room stood up at attention and saluted Zhang Xuelin. Everyone's gaze fell on Zhang Xuelin. To be precise, it was the peculiar firearm model that landed on Zhang Xuelin's shoulder. Han Linchun was even more stunned. Did he really design a new type of rifle in just 1 month, as a handsome young man? Did you even come up with the models? P.S. Is there anyone else reading this book? If there are any, please kneel down and ask everyone to cast some flowers, give tips, give feedback, and leave comments. Thank you. Whenever there is a reward, it will explode at 10 tomorrow. Chapter 6. Amazing Design. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Amazing Design. Watching Zhang Xuelin suddenly appear in the conference room, everyone was stunned. What is that thing that the young commander is carrying on his shoulder? It looks like it's a what special, is that a new type of rifle? But whose rifle looks like this? The length of the gun body is slightly shorter than that of a regular rifle, so you are at a disadvantage when fighting bayonets. And what is that crooked thing hanging under the half-barrel of the gun? Is it just for the sake of appearance? Keat, this doesn't look good either. But don't say it, the young commander is carrying that thing and standing there with a majestic aura, it really has a bit of an intimidating aura. Wu Cheng, who has always been the most observant, was the first to react. As soon as he saw what was on Zhang Xuelin's shoulder, he immediately realized that it was time for him to make money. The more novel a thing is, the more it needs to purchase new raw materials, and the more new materials it can salvage, the more oil and water it can bring. Wu Qing immediately flattered Zhang Xuelin and asked, "Marshal, what is that thing you are carrying?" "What thing?" "Humph." Zhang Xuelin gave Wu Qing a cold glance and had a slight ear for the evaluation of this procurement officer. Ignoring Wu Qing, Zhang Xuelin walked into the conference room and found Han Linchun standing in the main seat where he should have been sitting. Zhang Xuelin immediately said coldly, "Oh. Is General Manager Han taking up my seat? I don't know if it's the intention of the old handsome or General Manager Han himself." Zhang Xuelin's words kill and punish the heart. During this period, with the difference in identity between Zhang Xuelin and Han Linchun, if Zhang Xuelin is not happy, he can really shoot Han Linchun with one shot. Perhaps Zhang Xuelin will teach Zhang Xuelin a lesson afterwards, but can you expect his own father to do something to his son? Han Linchun was immediately scared and broke out in a cold sweat. He thought that the young commander Zhang Xuelin wouldn't come today, but to his surprise, it was almost noon and he ran over with a model of something unknown. Xiao Shui, I definitely didn't mean that. Han Linchun quickly wiped the desk in front of Zhang Xuelin and explained, I just saw you coming over from the window and saw that the table was a bit dusty. I quickly beat you up. After speaking, he immediately gave up his seat. It is normal for the second-level official to sit in the main position for a meeting without the chief official present, and naturally, Zhang Xuelin will not be at odds with Han Linchun just because of this matter. He walked up with the new rifle model on his shoulder, placed it on the table, and said to the crowd, "Let's take a look at the new rifle I designed." Han Linchun, who had studied in the East, was the first to approach and observe. He had a wide range of knowledge, and after observing the model of the new rifle up close, a hint of extreme surprise appeared in his eyes. Because looking at the long, slightly curved object hanging below the gun, he remembered a rifle model he had seen in a military academy before. Han Linchun vaguely remembers that thing seems to be called magazine. But it's impossible. That thing can't be a magazine. Only semi-automatic rifles have magazines. If that thing is a magazine, doesn't it mean that the model carried by the commander is a semi-automatic rifle? Impossible, impossible. Thinking of this, Han Linchun immediately denied himself. What is the concept of a semi-automatic rifle? Not to mention the East, even countries in Western Europe have only just been invented for a few years. Han Linchun glanced at his rifle in the corner of the conference room next to him, which he had obtained drawings from Austria and worked tirelessly to create. Did you see that rifle? I spent hundreds of thousands to buy the blueprint from Orlando. Although the person who sold the drawings to him didn't mention it, Han Linchun's heart was even brighter. If it weren't for the weapon blueprints that were decades behind, would the other party be so kind to sell them to the Dragon Man? As for semi-automatic rifles, which country would sell the newly developed weapon blueprints without reservation? Impossible, okay. Even if it's Zhang Xuelin, no matter how rich he is, the key is that he can't buy this thing with money. Those countries that can develop semi-automatic rifles are not good at it. How could they sell the blueprints so easily? The model used by this young commander is probably only a model. A counterfeit that cannot be made or used at all. In just a few seconds, Han Linchun had already sentenced Zhang Xuelin's new style rifle to death in his own heart. Coincidentally, someone next to him spoke up and said, "Marshal, is this the new rifle you designed over the past month? Zhang Xuelin nodded and said, not bad, come on, I'll give you a detailed introduction. As Zhang Xuelin spoke, he fully displayed the rifle, which looked extremely peculiar in shape, in front of this person. He pointed to the long piece of accessory hanging under the gun and said, I guess what everyone is most interested in is this thing. It's called a magazine, as the name suggests, it's used to hold bullets. As soon as Zhang Xuelin's words fell, the managers of the military factory present showed a puzzled expression. A middle-aged person in charge of a bullet production line asked suspiciously, put the bullet inside the gun body. When firing, what kind of magazine do you need to remove first, take out the bullet from inside, and then load it? Marshal, is this a bit unnecessary? On the side, Procurement Officer Wu Qing immediately took the initiative to help Zhang Xuelin break free, saying, I said Director Wang, but you don't understand that, do you? Can't you see clearly? The magazines inside are all filled with spare bullets, which are meant for brothers to use up the bullets on their bodies after finishing them. After finishing speaking, Wu Qing turned to look at Zhang Xuelin with a smile and said, Marshal, did I guess correctly? Zhang Xuelin hasn't spoken yet. Just now, Mr. Wang was clearly in a bad temper. He slapped the table and cursed at Wu Qing, fart. Have you ever been to the battlefield, you donkey egg? Do you know how many bullets an average soldier in the Fengtian army can receive per person? Do you still need spare bullets? Just carry those few rounds in your pocket, and you still need this thing to hold. Wu Qing narrowed his eyes and seemed to be waiting for Director Wang's words. He immediately said, so, Director Wang is not satisfied with the design of the young marshal. Wang Xinggua's words suddenly became awkward and he wilted. He was not afraid of Wu Qing, but he had to be afraid of Zhang Xuelin. Marshal. I didn't mean that. Mr. Wang quickly explained to Zhang Xuelin. Seeing Zhang Xuelin nod slightly at him with a smile, Wang Xinghua breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Zhang Xuelin silently jotted down what Secretary Wang had just said. He couldn't just focus on designing weapons, but also put improving the bullet production line on the agenda. In fact, the problem of insufficient per capita bullets is not only limited to the Fengtian army. In fact, at this time, all the warlords of the Dragon Kingdom were not very wealthy, and the Fengtian army was relatively good among these warlords. Holding the new rifle model in his hand, Zhang Xuelin smiled at everyone present and said, listen up, everyone. The function of a magazine is indeed to store bullets. His words have different reactions from people around him. Among them, Wu Qing showed a proud expression towards Director Wang, while the latter had a slightly disappointed expression. In Wang's view, given the current situation of the Fengtian army, there is no need for such embellishments. At this point, Zhang Xuelin continued, however, its function is not to remove the magazine and take out the bullet for loading when needed, as Wang Xinghua had imagined, but rather. Zhang Xuelin said with a smile on his face, it doesn't need to be dismantled, it can automatically transfer the bullet stored in it to the barrel of this rifle. I call this shooting method semi-automatic shooting mode. After Zhang Xuelin finished speaking, the entire conference room of the arsenal was completely silent. Han Lin-chun, standing beside him, suddenly trembled all over his body, and his eyes towards Zhang Xuelin were filled with shock and disbelief. P.S. Is there anyone else reading this book? If there are any, please kneel down and ask everyone to cast some flowers, give tips, give feedback, and leave comments. Thank you. Whenever there is a reward, it will explode at 10 tomorrow. Chapter 7. Chinese people are not inferior anywhere. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Han Lin-chun was certainly not suppressed by Zhang Xuelin's introduction to semi-automatic shooting. He didn't expect that his handsome young man would be even more innocent than he imagined. Since you know the word semi-automatic shooting, don't you know what a rifle with semi-automatic shooting technology is? Do you really think you have a natural talent to design a new rifle with semi-automatic shooting technology in just 1 month? If you really have such great talent, your old Zhang family may have already unified the Dragon Kingdom. These words are all from Han Linchuan's heart, and he is not foolish. He would never dare to say them in front of Zhang Xuelin. Han Linchun remained silent, and the others on site also remained silent. Han Linchun remained silent because he felt that Zhang Xuelin was innocent and ridiculous. In Han Linchuan's view, Zhang Xuelin now completely treats the arsenal as a playground for casual play. But Han Linchun couldn't do anything about it. Who would have given them a good old man? He could only silently sigh and remain silent in his heart. Except for Han Linchun, everyone else remained silent because they were really intimidated by Zhang Xuelin. Compared to the talented student Han Linchun who returned from studying abroad, these people do not know how advanced and complete a knowledge base is required to design a semi-automatic rifle, so they are more likely to trust Zhang Xuelin. I cursed and cursed a lot. In the quiet conference room, someone said a catchphrase from the old handsome Zhang Xuelin, which seemed to be shocked by Zhang Xuelin's words just now. In this current period, with the knowledge reserves of the people in front of him, Zhang Xuelin's words are similar to their mythological stories. After all, the design method he described that can automatically push bullets into the gun barrel is really a bit of a fantasy. A group of people looked at Zhang Xuelin as if he was in a mist, unable to speak for a moment. They are all those who play bolt-style rifles. When have you heard of this semi-automatic shooting method? Even Han Linchun, who had studied in the East, had only heard of it before and had never seen it at all. Looking at the people in front of him, they all looked like ground beetle. Zhang Xuelin sighed to himself. He still has a long way to go. After all, the foundation of the Dragon Kingdom is too weak now. He immediately said to the crowd, I can tell that everyone is very puzzled. If there is anything you don't understand, you can ask me. Han Linchun, standing beside him, suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. Why, is this young handsome still addicted to playing? At this moment, Han Linchun was really afraid that these people in front of him would ask a question unknowingly, but the young marshal beside him couldn't answer it. So, what a mess. Who knows what this young handsome man can do when he's embarrassed and angry? With this thought in mind, Han Linchun looked at the crowd with an extremely serious gaze and said, I don't think there will be any omissions in the design of the young commander. You shouldn't have any questions, right? A quick-witted person like Wu Cheng who can understand Han Linchuan's meaning means to remind everyone not to be unkind and embarrass the marshal. But there are also those with upright personalities who cannot understand the meaning of Han Linchuan's words. For example, one of the 2 staff members in charge of the firearms production line, a sturdy northeastern man who looked simple and honest, raised his hand and asked Zhang Xuelin, Young Marshal, I have doubts. Zhang Xuelin smiled slightly at him and said, Mr. Su, come on. The strong Han paused for a moment and said, Young Marshal knows me. Zhang Xuelin glanced at the other military workers and said, I know everyone here. In recent days, Zhang Xuelin has not only been busy designing rifles at the handsome mansion, but he has also learned about all the main staff in the arsenal based on his own memory. The strong man stared at the firearm model in Zhang Xuelin's hand without blinking. Marshal, I want to know, what principle do you use to make that thing automatically deliver bullets into the barrel? Listening to Director Su's question, Han Linchuan's face turned green. Is this something that can be asked? This technology is clearly the core of semi-automatic rifle technology. Don't say that the young marshal around him is just here to play, even if he knows. He can't just say it in front of so many people on the spot. Isn't it clear that we're going to trouble the young marshal? For the sake of his own safety, and for the safety of all the staff at the military factory on site, Han Linchun felt that he needed to appear on his own at this time. He glared at Director Su and said angrily, how can such technical matters be asked here? Are you confused? After finishing speaking, Han Linchun turned his head to look at Zhang Xuelin and made an effort to put on a serious expression, saying, Young Marshal, it's better not to reveal such secrets. In Han Linquan's view, he was completely trying his best to save the face of Marshal Zhang Xuelin, and he was really putting in a lot of effort. However, there's nothing to say, it's just the principle. Even if it's spread out, it's okay. The key is the technology for producing raw parts, that's the top priority. Zhang Xuelin's words almost made Han Linquan vomit blood on the spot. He certainly didn't believe that this young handsome standing next to him in his early 20s could explain the design principle of a semi-automatic rifle clearly. But seeing the confident appearance of this young marshal, Han Linquan didn't know how to end it for him. He could only cover his forehead and prepare mentally, listening to how the young marshal explained his design ideas. Zhang Xuelin removed the magazine from the rifle model and pointed it inside the barrel, saying, "Mr. Su, the semi-automatic shooting rifle can use some gunpowder gas, combined with the recoil of the firearm itself, to recoil the bullet after firing. After the bullet is ejected, the spring inside the magazine will compress the bullet inside and move upwards, replacing the position of the just fired bullet, achieving the automatic loading and loading process of the bullet. In this way, soldiers with guns can fire a bullet every time they pull the trigger, without having to repeatedly pull the bolt." After Zhang Xuelin finished speaking, the conference room was once again quiet. Everyone still looked at Zhang Xuelin in a mist. Most people don't understand what Zhang Xuelin was saying just now, but they know that what Zhang Xuelin said is very impressive. Among the crowd, only Han Linquan's gaze at Zhang Xuelin changed. Because he realized that Zhang Xuelin didn't seem as foolish as he had imagined. On the one hand, Su Gonsher, who was in charge of a firearms production line, also slightly understood the meaning of Zhang Xuelin's words. He pondered and said, "I'm a good boy, this design idea. Is it passed down from foreigners?" Zhang Xuelin frowned and looked at him, saying, "Mr. Su's words are a bit off topic. Does advanced technology necessarily belong to foreigners? Can't we dragon people design our own semi-automatic rifles?" Su was confused, while Han Linquan was confused. The others present were all confused. After Zhang Xuelin just explained the principle of the semi-automatic rifle, everyone assumed it was a design passed down from foreigners. But now it seems, my goodness. Is it difficult? Is this really designed by the young master himself? Zhang Xuelin's gaze slowly swept over everyone present and said, "This semi-automatic rifle design is entirely my own, without any involvement from others, let alone foreigners. Please believe that compared to foreigners, we dragon people and Chinese people. Not bad anywhere." After Zhang Xuelin finished speaking, there was a moment of silence in the conference room, and then, wow. Applause thunderous. P.S. Is there anyone else reading this book? If there are any, please kneel down and ask everyone to cast some flowers, give tips, give feedback, and leave comments. Thank you. Whenever there is a reward, it will explode at 10 tomorrow. Chapter 8. Do you just want to be the king of Northeast China? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dragon people have always had a sense of patriotism, and people in this era are generally honest and simple. Zhang Xuelin's brief words just now may not sound like much, but they happen to pierce deep into the hearts of these passionate men who have experienced the weak and incompetent rule of the Qing government. Don't worry about whether the semi-automatic rifle that the young commander brought out was personally designed by him, or whether this thing can be actually produced. Just give him these few words and we'll have to give him a few whips. Even Han Linquan applauded slightly with emotion. He, who has studied abroad, knows very well what kind of treatment dragon people face outside their country in this era. If this semi-automatic rifle were really designed by the Marshal, and if this semi-automatic rifle could really be produced, that would be great. Until now, Han Linquan still felt that if the semi-automatic rifle in front of him was really designed by Marshal Zhang Xuelin, it would probably not be produced. If it can be produced, it is likely not designed by Zhang Xuelin. Most likely, the old handsome used some special relationships to obtain blueprints from abroad, and then gave them to the young handsome to put some gold on his face. In a vague way, Han Linchun felt that he had already understood the truth of the matter. It has been proven that Han Linchuan's ability to gain Zhang Xuelin's trust and become the general manager of the Fengtian arsenal has two tricks, but what happened to Zhang Xuelin, whether it was time travel or awakening the golden finger, is too bizarre. He couldn't even imagine the strangeness of Han Linchun. Next, Zhang Xuelin explained in detail to everyone present what semi-automatic shooting means. The biggest advantage of semi-automatic shooting is its powerful firepower, as it does not require pulling the bolt, so you only need to constantly pull the trigger to continuously fire bullets. Until all the bullets in the magazine are empty. Of course, this shooting method also requires bullets, which is definitely not feasible with our current ammunition production line in the arsenal. Zhang Xuelin sighed and said, there is also the issue of our Fengtian army's bullet production capacity that Secretary Wang just mentioned. If we want to equip the soldiers with this semi-automatic rifle, it will definitely not be appropriate for each person to fire a few more bullets. So overall, if we want to mass produce this type of rifle, we also need to build an advanced bullet production line. Everyone, our task is quite arduous. Most people fell silent upon hearing Zhang Xuelin's words, except for the procurement officer Wu Cheng, who seemed to have been beaten with chicken blood. Marshal. As long as it's for the army and for the old commander, everything is worth it. Zhang Xuelin gave a cold smile. In Wu Cheng's eyes, it was not for the old handsome, but for himself worth it. After all, the more things he purchases, the more profit he as a procurement officer can make. However, Zhang Xuelin did not fully understand it. He had just taken over the military factory and its foundation was unstable. Before setting new production tasks, the military factory did not have a large procurement plan, so he waited a little longer. This Wu Chen, who dares to indulge in his own old Zhang family's wealth, will eventually be dealt with by him. Just as Zhang Xuelin silently made plans in his heart, Director Su suddenly spoke up and said, Marshal, I'm afraid it's not just bullets, is it? Zhang Xuelin asked, is Director Su trying to say something? Xiao Shuai, if we want to produce this semi-automatic rifle, I'm afraid all the production lines in our arsenal now meet the conditions, right? Furthermore, can our current military technology achieve the intended use of this rifle design? Look, this is an expert. If you don't speak, use it. As soon as you speak, you'll hit the nail on the head. Zhang Xuelin's gaze as he looked at Director Su showed a hint of appreciation. The prototype of the semi-automatic assault rifle he is currently holding is the very famous August 1st Dacian in later generations. With the military technology of various countries in the world at present, not only the now riddled Dragon country, but also the Western powers in Europe cannot handle it. But Zhang Xuelin had already considered this issue. So he has been busy for almost a month, and most of Zhang Xuelin's time has been spent on improving the Bai bar, rather than the initial design. Don't forget that before crossing over, Zhang Xuelin was a serious military research scientist from 100 years later. If it weren't for the improvement of the original design of the Bai Dash, with the level of Zhang Xuelin's golden finger, the original Bai Dash design could be achieved in minutes. With the divine level rifle skill gifted by the golden finger, the improved Bai Dashan by Zhang Xuelin only reduces the production difficulty, and its performance not only does not decrease, but also greatly improves. The most significant improvement is the range. The ordinary Bai Dash has an effective range of 400 meters and a maximum kill distance of 500 meters. However, the new Bai Dash, improved by Zhang Xuelin, has an effective range of up to 600 meters. The farthest killing distance can even reach 800 meters. Nearly twice the size of the original August 1st bar. Of course, these are things that Zhang Xuelin does not intend to tell the public now. He patiently explained to everyone, don't worry about technical issues, isn't I here? The technical problem can be completely solved, and the only problem we need to face is that our production line is not working. We need the most advanced military production line, including the production line of gun barrels, gun mechanisms, and magazines, and we all need to upgrade. After Zhang Xuelin finished speaking, the hot atmosphere in the conference room suddenly became dull. This is also an upgrade, that is also an upgrade. Good guy, how much does it cost? This level of matter is no longer something that everyone in the arsenal can decide. The others remained silent, except for the procurement officer Wu Qing, who excitedly said, "Upgrade. Marshal needs to be upgraded. He cursed me and upgraded the production line, giving us hundreds of thousands of brothers in the Fengtian army a semi-automatic rifle like this. When the time comes, our Fengtian army will rush out of Shanhaiguan and carry the old commander into Beiping to become the emperor." Looking at Wu Cheng's cheerful expression, many people who knew he was a good person secretly despised him. Han Linchun looked at him coldly and said, "Officer Wu, purchasing a production line is not a small matter. You say it doesn't matter, I say it doesn't matter. It's up to the young and old marshals to say it." Han Linchun's words are said to have given Zhang Xuelin enough face, but in fact, Zhang Xuelin's words do not count. Zhang Xuelin needs to make a decision before it can be implemented. Wu Qing awkwardly said, "With such a perfect firearm design as the young marshal, the old marshal will definitely agree." So everyone in the arsenal turned their heads to look at Zhang Xuelin and Han Linchun. The only ones who can directly talk to the old handsome Zhang Xuelin here are the two of them. Zhang Xuelin said with great confidence, "Don't worry, I'll take care of the old man. Today, I'm here to notify everyone that the factory is not allowed to start construction for the time being. Our arms factory needs a major upgrade." Wu Qing immediately raised his hands and exclaimed excitedly, "Young Marshal, you really cursed Batsi Yingming." Pop. Han Linchun slapped Wu Qing on the head and said, "How can you talk to the young general? You can also use the old general's mouth." Wu Qing hugged his head and said, excited for a moment. "General Han, don't be angry, and don't be angry, young marshal." Zhang Xuelin gave a faint smile and didn't argue with him. "In the future, I'll scold him and deal with him." At noon, Zhang Xuelin had a meal with everyone in the arms factory. Originally, Wu Qing suggested inviting Zhang Xuelin to the city to eat, but Zhang Xuelin politely declined. In the afternoon, Zhang Xuelin took a nap at the arms factory and woke up at 4 o'clock. After checking the time, he took his deputy and guards and got into the car, heading towards the Fengtian city. Returning to the handsome mansion, Zhang Xuelin headed straight to the study of the old handsome Zhang Xuelin. The two of them sat opposite each other in the study. Zhang Xuelin was practicing his brush with a straight face, but his half-hearted calligraphy skills naturally prevented him from writing any good characters. "Dad, your character is becoming more and more like Wang Shusheng's," Zhang Xuelin said while looking on and flattering, "I cursed so hard." Zhang Xuelin looked up and cursed at Zhang Xuelin, "You bastard, where are you going to bury your father?" Zhang Xuelin immediately raised his hand and smiled, saying, "Absolutely from the heart. Xiao Te, why bother pulling a calf for me?" Zhang Xuelin put down the brush in his hand and asked, "How are you doing at the arsenal? What kind of design for the August 1st bumper are you doing? Do anyone else have any objections?" Zhang Xuelin said with great reverence, "You are the old commander, the commander-in-chief. Can we hide from you what happened in the arsenal during the day today?" Zhang Xuelin glanced at Zhang Xuelin and remained silent. He sat quietly on the chair and began to be lost in thought. After waiting for a while, Zhang Xuelin leaned forward and suddenly spoke softly, asking, "Dad, is it difficult? Do you just want to be the king of Northeast China?" Zhang Xuelin's eyelids twitched slightly, but he didn't open his eyes or speak. The study was quiet, except for the faint sound of the two gentlemen breathing. P.S. Is there anyone else reading this book? If there are any, please kneel down and ask everyone to cast some flowers, give tips, give feedback, and leave comments. Thank you. Whenever there is a reward, it will explode at 10 tomorrow. Chapter 9. Procurement Production Line. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After a long time, Zhang Xuelin opened his eyes and looked at Zhang Xuelin, saying, I scolded you so badly, kid. Do you know that I don't like you? Zhang Xuelin nodded and said, I understand. You like Duozi, but you don't like me. Haha. You cursed so hard. Zhang Xuelin laughed and cursed, so, you kid, you don't have any objections. Zhang Xuelin said calmly, I don't care. Anyway, even if the sixth son becomes the head of the family in the future, he won't take any action against me, my dear brother. I have no other choice but to pursue wealth and prosperity. The smile on Zhang Xuelin's face disappeared with a shudder. He raised his hand and hit Zhang Xuelin's head, cursing, you tasteless thing. You have no ambition. With a slap, Zhang Xuelin fell silent again as he looked at Zhang Xuelin. Rao, just now Zhang Xuelin said he has no other needs, but let's see what he's doing now, designing new weapons, upgrading the arsenal. Zhang Xuelin gritted his teeth and rubbed his head, saying, I scolded you so badly. I don't like you, but it doesn't matter whether I like you or not. Who cursed me so badly that I could pass on my legacy? That's really important. Speak up. Let me hear what you're planning to buy. Zhang Xuelin immediately grinned and was about to approach. This was when Zhang Xuelin raised his hand and gestured to him, shouting outside the door, Xishuan. Arrive. A strong and powerful response sounded outside the door, which was Zhao Xishuan, Zhang Xuelin's close aide. Zhang Xuelin instructed him through the door, let me discuss something with Xuelin. You can highlight your moves and don't make someone crawl through the door. Don't worry, handsome. After giving orders, Zhang Xuelin carefully sat back in his seat and said to Zhang Xuelin, speak up. Zhang Xuelin discovered that his cheap father in front of him, the seemingly carefree Northeast king, was actually very careful. Zhang Xuelin leaned forward and began to whisper softly to Zhang Xuelin. The two of them chatted for hours and didn't come out of the study even though it was time for dinner. Madame came over to call, but Zhang Xuelin waved and drove her away. Zhang Xuelin's wife Yang Jinhua, who had just left the country, came over to shout, but was politely dissuaded by Zhang Xuelin. Later on, the two of them decided to have their food brought to the study for consumption. Zhang Xuelin, the sixth son in the middle, also came once, but the old man Zhang Xuelin stared at him for a while, silently sighed before letting him leave. Zhang Xuelin saw all of this clearly. He knew that the old handsome sighed because he wished that his favorite son, Zhang Xuelin, could sit in front of him for a long conversation at this moment. After Zhang Xuelin left, Zhang Xuelin stared blankly at Zhang Xuelin for a while, staring straight at him and saying, Dad, what do you mean by that? Zhang Xuelin remained silent for a moment and asked, Xuelin, what would you do to Lu Zi if your Laozi said, if it were you who would be in charge of the Fengtian army in the future? Zhang Xuelin was taken aback for a moment. Is this the legendary tiger body shaking and Wang Ba's aura overflowing? Does the old man now see that he is destined to be a noble? But the next second, upon seeing Zhang Xuelin's probing and guarded gaze, Zhang Xuelin was immediately awakened. He immediately said, if there really were a day when I could take a bite of meat, there would definitely be 6 sons taking a sip of soup to drink. When Zhang Xuelin said this, his tone and attitude were quite sincere, and he was also quite satisfied with his answer. However, you cursed so hard. Zhang Xuelin raised his hand and wanted to give Zhang Xuelin another shot. He stared and said, Dude, you're in charge of the Fengtian army. You're only giving your brother soup. You have to let Duozi drink soup even if you don't eat meat. He's young, you have to let him. Little prince, learn more about human relationships and worldly wisdom. Zhang Xuelin quickly said, let's talk about eating meat and soup later. Aren't you still healthy now? Let's talk about the military factory. Zhang Xuelin waved his hand in extreme annoyance and cursed, "You really scolded me, what else are you saying? You little brat, just made up your mind. Write down what you want to buy, and let me add up how much it costs. If you can afford it, buy it." Zhang Xuelin asked, "What if I can't afford it?" Can't afford it. Zhang Xuelin's words made the old man so angry that he blew his nose and stared at him. "Grandma is such a bear, I can't afford to buy him to rob those big dog households. Even if we rob him of smashed pots and sell iron, we have to buy it. These days, guns and poles are everything. No one can stop me from strengthening my Fengtian army's combat capabilities." "Okay." Zhang Xuelin immediately patted the table, and with the old man's words, everything was easy to handle. He was about to get up and leave when he said, "Don't worry, stop." Zhang Xuelin stopped him. Zhang Xuelin turned around and said, "What's wrong?" The old man pointed to the calligraphy on the table, which looked like a dog crawling, and asked Zhang Xuelin seriously, "Do you really have the character of Wang Shusheng?" Zhang Xuelin blinked and nodded, saying, "Of course." Zhang Xuelin cracked his mouth and chuckled, cursing, "You've been scolding me a lot. Your kid is getting better at speaking now. Get out of here." A few days later, Dalian Port Terminal. A ship is parked on the sea, and about 10 people are waiting on the dock to board. Suddenly, a group of cars roared from behind, and a convoy headed straight towards the dock. In a car in the middle of the convoy, Xiaoyozi Zhang Xuelin held the steering wheel and said to Zhang Xuelin and Yang Jinhua sitting behind him, "Brother, isn't it just about purchasing a few production lines? Is it necessary for you to go there in person? You still have your sister.in.law with you. I see that your past procurement of production lines was fake. Going on a honeymoon with your sister.in.law is the real thing, right?" Zhang Xuelin sighed and said, "If someone could be sent over to handle the matter, of course I wouldn't want it to be so troublesome. But, Duozi, the things we're going to buy this time are not ordinary production lines. I'll be more cautious when I go over. Moreover, if I don't show up, I'm afraid people from Wuching alone won't be able to buy many things." Zhang Xuelin nodded and said, I understand. This is called technical blockade. People won't easily sell us things that are too precious. But brother, you haven't been back since you went out for a month or so, I'll miss you." Zhang Xuelin smiled and patted Zhang Xueliang's shoulder, "I will come back as soon as possible." Yang Jinhua hugged Zhang Xuelin's arm and stared blankly at the ship parked on the sea in the distance. 1 hour later, the ship set sail. As Zhang Xuelin watched the shore land getting further and further away from him, he took a deep breath. He is going to Europe and Germany by boat this time, in order to purchase Germany's most advanced rifle and bullet production lines. Having traveled through so many days, he finally took a substantial first step towards his goal. Holding on to the ship's fence tightly, Zhang Xuelin looked at the northeast land across the sea in front of him and once again whispered to himself in his heart, "I will never let the tragedy of my past life happen again on this land." P.S. Is there anyone else reading this book? If there are any, please kneel down and ask everyone to cast some flowers, give tips, give feedback, and leave comments. Thank you. Whenever there is a reward, it will explode at 10 tomorrow. Chapter 10. 7.62 Gun Clan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 7.62 Gun Clan. A month's time flies by. In this month, Zhang Xuelin, his wife Yang Jinhua, his adjutant Yu Qinggui, and a group of accompanying guards set out from Dalian Port by boat and went south all the way through Qingdao, Shanghai, Quanzhou, and Guangzhou, then left the Dragon Kingdom, past India, Turkey, and Spain, and finally crossed the English Channel to set foot on German land. As the northeast king of the Dragon Kingdom, Zhang Xuelin's influence is not limited to the Dragon Kingdom itself. As soon as Zhang Xuelin got off the ship, representatives from 2 local weapon manufacturers in Germany waited at the dock holding their famous brands. 2 weapon manufacturers, one named Rhineland Company and the other named Heikoler Company, sent representatives to welcome Zhang Xuelin, consisting of a man and a woman. The man's name is Harlem, representing Harlem Company, and the woman's name is Diana, representing Black Kohler Company. After the trilateral meeting, there was a brief exchange of greetings with the help of a translator, and then Zhang Xuelin decided to go to Heikoler Company to take a look first. In the car, Diana, the representative of Black Kohler Company, asked Zhang Xuelin, "Dear Eastern guests, I wonder what weapons you are coming to purchase this time. We can provide Commander Zhang with the latest Mauser rifles, bullets, and small-caliber field guns. We believe that customers from the East will definitely like them." When the translator explained Diana's words to Zhang Xuelin for a while, Zhang Xuelin smiled slightly and said, "Miss Diana, I came here with sincerity and I hope you won't deal with us." Diana and Zhang Xuelin warmly smiled and said, "That's natural. We have long admired the reputation of Zhang Deshuai in the Dragon Kingdom, and we really hope to establish friendship with guests from the East." Diana glanced at Yang Jinhua sitting next to Zhang Xuelin and smiled, "Mr. Zhang's wife is really beautiful." Zhang Xuelin smiled slightly and stopped speaking. When they arrived at a military product warehouse of Black Kohler Company, everyone got off the car. Diana led Zhang Xuelin and his team through rows of warehouses and arrived at a warehouse in the farthest corner. Zhang Xuelin looked at the warehouse in front of him, and the surroundings were covered with moss. The iron ropes used on the warehouse door were rusty, and it didn't look like they were often visited. Looking at the other warehouses here, each one was clean and bright, and some even had guards standing guard. In contrast, Zhang Xuelin could probably guess what kind of customer the Germans in front of him thought of him. Zhang Xuelin immediately said coldly to Diana, "Miss Diana, you don't need to open the door of this warehouse. I know what kind of goods are inside. It seems that your company doesn't welcome us very much. If that's the case, then we won't bother." After the translator conveyed Zhang Xuelin's words, Diana said awkwardly, "I'm very sorry for the guests from the East, because we have also received guests from the Dragon Kingdom before, but they only indicated that they only want cheap things, so." Zhang Xuelin cleared his throat and looked at Diana with a smile, saying, "Miss Diana, let me be honest with you. Even if you take out your country's M1916 semi-automatic rifle, I don't mind. The purpose of my trip here is not your military products. What I need is to build a sufficiently advanced military production line in Longwa. What I want is not your products, but your machines. Miss Diana, do you understand?" It took a lot of effort for the translator to explain Zhang Xuelin's words to Diana. Upon hearing Zhang Xuelin's statement that he had no interest in their German M1916 semi-automatic rifle, Diana just smiled slightly. In her opinion, this is mostly because the Eastern guest in front of her doesn't understand what the M1916 semi-automatic rifle produced in her own country means. At this thought, Diana couldn't help but get a little angry, but after all, the other party came to deliver money, and she didn't show too much behavior. She just casually asked, "Well, the guest from the East, do you know what a semi-automatic rifle is?" It seemed that Diana's words were not strong enough in terms of killing power, and she added a bit of sharpness in her words. "Our country's M1916 semi-automatic rifle is one of the top semi-automatic rifles in the world today, and as far as I know, your country is still using bolt-type rifles. Even Zhang Deshuai spent a lot of money on a bolt-type rifle design from Austria a few days ago. Sorry, there was no offense, but in my opinion, that bolt-type rifle was an outdated product even in Germany 10 years ago." Zhang Xuelin smiled slightly and took a ship for over a month on his way here. Apart from taking care of his wife carefully, he did not miss out on other tasks. This time, Zhang Xuelin turned to the translator and said, "Translate the meaning of every word in my words to Miss Diana completely." After a brief pause, Zhang Xuelin continued, "Miss Diana, the M1916 semi-automatic rifle may be precious in your hearts, but in my eyes, I'm sorry, it's just a pile of shit, a stinky pile of shit." After speaking, Zhang Xuelin took out a set of drawings and slowly opened them. The design of the German Mauser M1916 semi-automatic rifle, which Diana had just highly praised, was depicted on the blueprint. And it is a very complete, very precise, and even partially improved complete design drawing. Zhang Xuelin doesn't mind giving this improved M1916 design to Diana, because even if their M1916 is perfect, as long as their Bai bar is successfully launched, it will be at least 50 years ahead of their M1916. You should know that the Bai Dash was a weapon designed in the 1980s, and there are few assault rifles that lead them by 16 years for 50 years. Diana looked curiously at the design drawings unfolded by Zhang Xuelin, and the translator beside her nervously translated Zhang Xuelin's words. Diana finished reading the drawings and speaking the translation. Diana's face changed, and the translator's face also changed. Eastern guests, where did you get this blueprint from? Diana spoke in a hurried and strong tone, as if she had seen something very bad happening. However, Zhang Xuelin only responded with a faint smile and a nonchalant hand gesture. Diana took a deep breath and said to Zhang Xuelin, "Okay, guests from the East, I admit that I had neglected you before. Please wait a moment." After a moment, Diana led Zhang Xuelin and Yang Jinhua to a reception room, where Diana and several exceptionally serious-looking Germans appeared. On the tables and tables surrounded by Germans, there is a design diagram of the improved German Mauser M1916 semi-automatic rifle that Zhang Xuelin just brought out. As soon as Zhang Xuelin arrived, all these people's eyes shifted to him. One of the tall middle-aged Germans opened the door and asked Zhang Xuelin, "Dear customer from the East, where did you get this blueprint from?" Zhang Xuelin, as explained to Diana before, spread his hand and remained silent. The middle-aged man had a puzzled expression, and a slightly skinny German beside him asked Zhang Xuelin, "Oriental customer, I wonder what you are here to purchase this time." Zhang Xuelin then slightly restrained his posture and said to the person in front of him, "I want to introduce your rifle bullets and gun mechanism module production line." Several Germans exchanged glances, and the skinny German smiled and said, "Bullet production line. As far as I know, your Dragon Kingdom already has a very complete bullet production capacity. With your father's Fengtian arsenal, you can independently produce lead shell bullets." Zhang Xuelin smiled slightly, took a step forward, and looked into the eyes of the skinny German in front of him word by word, saying, "Sir, listen carefully. What I want is your latest copper core bullet production line." As soon as Zhang Xuelin spoke these words, all the Germans were shocked. The skinny German's face changed almost instantly. "How did you know we started mass-producing copper core bullets?" Zhang Xuelin remained as carefree as before, spreading his hands and saying to him, "Is this important?" "Very important." The skinny German almost roared, "This is a secret of the empire. And you, a foreigner thousands of miles away, know it. Isn't this important?" Zhang Xuelin showed an apologetic expression and said, "You can rest assured that as long as I can leave Germany with satisfactory results within a week, your secret will still be a secret." "Well, let me remind you a little more that I know more than just these secrets about your country. For example, I have some understanding of the rifles and field guns you will be producing in the coming years, as well as your new heavy machine guns." As Zhang Xuelin spoke, he beckoned his deputy Yu Qingui to unfold a set of drawings in front of several Germans. The above is not something that transcends the times, but it is all the top secrets of the German military industry during this period. Watching something he was extremely familiar with unfold in front of him by a foreigner, several German military research experts were all dumbfounded for a moment. Seeing the situation in front of him, Zhang Xuelin's face showed a satisfied expression, and what he wanted was this kind of result. "Ladies and gentlemen, I repeat that as long as I can leave with satisfactory results within a week, the secret of the Great Germany remains a secret." For a moment, the room fell into silence. A few days later, Zhang Xuelin's achievements won the intention order for cooperation in Germany's bullet production line, as well as a batch of orders for rifle machines and barrel production lines. and Germany separately dispatched warships and cargo ships to escort Zhang Xuelin and his delegation back to Longhua. Standing on the deck of a German warship, feeling the majesty of the German warship, Zhang Xuelin was not envious at all. Because he can be certain that with his own help, in the near future, Dragon Kingdom will have more advanced warships. Of course, this is the future, and what I need to do now is to first introduce Germany's bullet production line into the domestic market and successfully establish Dragon's first copper core bullet production line. Then create a 7.62 gun clan belonging to the Dragon Kingdom. And the first member of this gun clan is the Bai Dashan, which has already been designed, improved and formed by oneself.